Hello and good morning. On behalf of Century Business Technologies and myself, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Lucas Baeza, and I'm a Managed IT and Network Services Specialist here at Century. Today, our special guest expert is Geoffrey Jenista from the Department of Homeland Security. He is an advisor for Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska, coordinating cyber preparedness, risk mitigation, incident coordination, and cybersecurity policies for state, local, tribal, and territorial government entities. Basically, in this region of the U.S., he's seen all and knows how you can prepare your organization now and into the future. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, he'll be teaching us what a regional cybersecurity incident response looks like. It's our goal to make these as interactive as time allows. Any interactions with the audience will be done via chat, and if we have some time towards the end, we'll try to ask as many questions as we can get to. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Geoffrey Jenista with the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you for joining us, and we're really happy to have you here.
Thank you, Lucas, and welcome everybody. And hopefully you see Homeland Security Incident Management. Again, welcome everybody. I do realize and acknowledge that you are small, medium-sized business owners, which introduces a new challenge with CISA focused at protecting the nation. I want you all to understand that it's the small and medium-sized business owners that are feeders upline to larger organizations and thus to the nation. And you are also very important to your communities because they need you to keep your stores running in order for them to receive services and goods, etc. If you've never heard of CISA, the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, it is because we are slightly over 2 years old, about 2.5 now. We used to be, if you see the 4 buttons, we had federal network protection, we had protective security advisors, cyber protective security advisors, and emergency communications, and they formed us into one group so that we can look holistically at all risk across the nation, down to states, counties, communities, and even down to the sectors that your business may be part of. So we take all of this, we look at everything from the weather to the political environment to any kind of protest and everything else, and we build these risk models so that we can notify everybody from the small, medium-sized business communities all the way up to national leaders on the existing threats within a given area. So my first ask as business owners or leadership in an organization is, have you conducted a business impact analysis? And you'll see where this comes into play shortly. But effectively, if you do a business impact analysis, what you're going to do is you're going to list all of the services you provide to your customers, whether that's another organization or to people in general. So what you need to do is you start by listing, your service A, you sell a product. Service B might be you pay your employees. Service C might be you host a website. I don't know. It varies on each of the organizations. And then within each of those services, you then have to list what people could impact that service. And what I mean by that is if your employees don't show up, could you still keep your doors open? What data is required to provide that service? So if you lost access to information, could you still support that service? If you lost your technology or your software, again, could you support the service? And ultimately, and these COVID rules are really hindering a lot of organizations. What happens if you couldn't even get into your store or your location or your facility? What is that impact? And ultimately, if you define these services, with service A being the most critical, and in this example, service C being the least critical, you can kind of do a mapping of the people, the data, the technology, and the facilities to each of these services. This way, you will know at a moment's notice if you lost your access to data. It might impact service B in this example. or if some of your employees won the lottery. We always put a positive spin. We want good things for people. But if they won the lottery and quit working for you, could you still support those services? So let's talk about risk. You may not think about risk perspective consciously, but everything you do for your organization surrounds risk. Do you roll out a new product? Do you purchase supplies? How much do you supply? What's that all based on? You're making risk decisions. But if you can think about risk to your people, your data, your technology, and your facility, you then have to think about what threats are there. And in today's age of COVID, you even have to think about these viruses. That's a pandemic. A lot of organizations dropped pandemic responses out of their incident response plans until COVID hit. What vulnerabilities do you have to your people, data, software, and facilities? Do you have fire extinguishers regarding that? Do you have emergency escape plans for your staff? Are you watching the weather reports, from natural disasters? Are you a critical provider of an item for a bigger entity? And what I mean by that is defense industry base. You take Century Business Technologies. They're a major provider of maintenance and support to small, medium-sized businesses, counties, things like that. What happens if they go out of business? What's that impact to their customers? Things like that. And then what you do is you mitigate those. So if you're afraid of your facility burning down, you install sprinkler systems. You have fire extinguishers. If you're afraid of losing access to your data that you need to run your business, you take backups of that data so that you can always restore it. Things like that. All of this needs to be in an incident response plan. Ultimately, what are the consequences if you don't do this? The consequences could be a financial hit. You may go out of business. You may get sued by your customers. You may be subject to regulatory fines or issues. There's a lot of different consequences. The major one to most small and medium-sized businesses is your reputation. Without a solid reputation, your customers quit coming to you. And, if you are subject of a ransomware attack, they may stop coming to you because they can't get to your website to order products or services. If they find out that you lost their customer data, you may have to pay for some of that credit monitoring. That right now is about $4 to $5 per record. So if you have 1,000 customers, there's a $5,000 hit to your organization. So I'd like to define some terms. One is the confidentiality of your technology, facility, and data. Who has access to all of that? It's you, your employees, your customers, things like that. And what is the integrity of the data? For some of you, you might remember the Enron fiasco here a few years back, where the business owners cooked the books. They had one set of books that they provided to the SEC that showed they were on upward trends and everything was copacetic and all things good. Then they had the other set that was actually tracking the true financials. And when the dust cleared, what they actually found out is that the company had gone dead broke. There was no money for retirement funds. They hadn't been providing any insurance for their staff and ultimately went out of business. And there was a whole lot of people that had careers with Enron. And then the availability. Is it available when you need it? So if you're using cloud services, is access to those records always available? I often joke about, millennials and how important Facebook and everything else is to them. And then we had an incident out on the East Coast where nobody could get to Facebook. And we literally had young adults falling on the ground in the fetal position because they could not tell their friends that they were at Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that. Those are the concepts of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, what are the most prevalent threats? Everybody's been working at home. We do 90% of our communications in the business world using email. And so you're susceptible to receiving a bad email from a threat actor, okay? Somebody inside or outside that means to do you harm. It's not the email itself that's bad, it's the content of the email that makes it very nefarious. For example, they may want you to verify your credentials. All they're really doing is stealing your username and your password so that they can try to use that elsewhere in the world. They may already know who you bank with. They may know your personal accounts, your personal email accounts, things like that. They may try to reuse that username and password. They may also try to get you to click on links, which then goes back to a cloud provider and it starts to download ransomware or malware. And effectively what that does is locks out access to your data because it encrypts it, which means you don't have access to it unless you pay them a fee. The challenge with that is a lot of these folks that use this ransomware are overseas. So you could potentially, if you pay the ransom, you could potentially be charged with funding terrorist activities, okay? It's just a thought, but it has been upheld in court. What happens if you're losing the theft of your data or your technology? What happens if an employee were to walk out of there with your laptop or with your hard drives or whatever that looks like? That's another issue. What if your customers had access to your business office where your computers are? These are all things to think about. And then, a lot of times business owners set up free Wi-Fi for their customers and whatnot. They attach printers and cameras and all these other wireless devices. Those are also access points for somebody sitting out in the parking lot to gain access to your inside network, and then they can go look around. They can get people's HR records, They can start getting people's addresses, phone numbers, email addresses. They could potentially find out any HIPAA data that you might have on the health condition of your employees. They use these devices simply to gain access, thus they break the confidentiality of your networks. So what should you put into an incident response plan? The first thing you need to think about, because all of the responses will be different regarding a natural disaster. A natural disaster could be snowing, it could be tornadoes, it could be flooding. I've had to deal with all of these incidents in the last 4 to 5 years regarding, we had the flooding up in Nebraska and Iowa a couple years ago. They're still recovering from that. This last, 6 months ago, the high winds that went across Iowa, that shut down a lot of businesses, primarily because it blew down power lines. Okay. And in case you didn't know it, we sit on a fault line, so there could be earthquakes here in the Midwest. This is all things to think about within your incident response. Now, what are your external dependencies? Who are your suppliers? Who are your vendors? Where do you get your internet service from, your phone service, your power, your water? Who do you rely on for security? Is it the local police? Is it the fire department, the ambulance? All of these things that you depend on, you also have to watch for, because what happens if one of them are not available to support your business? Again, you're downstream from them, but that could be an impact to your organization. And then what are your internal procedures? How do you unlock the doors? How do you make people log into the computers? Does everybody use the same account? Does everybody on your staff all have admin rights to your computers, which means if they click on an email, they could automatically download malware or ransomware because they have administrative rights. These are all of these internal procedures that you're required for OSHA and for your financials and everything else. Now you need to think about it also from the perspective of an incident response. And then you also need to think about service continuity plans. And what that means is, in the event of an incident, can you maintain your business operations? That's the business continuity. Okay, I was part of the recovery for both Hurricane Harvey, and I started my business continuity career back in the day under Katrina down in New Orleans. Some businesses were able to open up, others relocated to other parts of the country, and ultimately, with all of the FEMA funds being provided to business owners, they had to have a business continuity plan in order to receive fundings going forward from all the fraud with Katrina. What does continuity of operations look like? That means you could relocate to another facility temporarily while you restore services at your main facility. You know, so do you have could you run this out of your home or your garage? Do you have an ability to find another temporary storefront to hang your shingle? Things like that. Then you restore all your stuff and then you bring it back. But the entire time you're still doing and conducting business. And then what does your IT disaster recovery plan look like? And that involves recovery of data, recovery of technology, and recovery of software. We're going to discuss that here in just a second. So why do you need that plan? Basically to reduce chaos. You and your staff and your partners all understand what the process looks like. You all understand who's going to do what, both during a cybersecurity, a pandemic, a physical, or a natural disaster. I've walked into numerous incidents and everybody's running around looking like a bunch of ants. Everybody's doing this, that, and the other, and ultimately what they're doing is causing more impact than the original incident. So you need those plans, you need to brief your staff, you need to have these processes with your partners so that they understand, hey, if you lose internet access and you call them, you should be on their priority list to restore those services. Or what happens if the shipment you just ordered to restock your shelves is delayed by flooding up in Nebraska? You need to have these plans. Ultimately, under COVID, what's going to happen if you lose access to your facility? I mean, the whole United States got shut down for COVID. What's that mean to you? Could you go in temporarily, grab your servers, grab your laptops, whatever it is, potentially box up all your supplies and take them to another location? What's that look like? So, you know, again, you have to think about access to this information technology and facilities. What happens if you were to lose the payment card information? You know, how liable are you should you lose credit cards? How liable are you should you lose customer information? What would happen if you clicked on that email, that phishing email, and you divulged your bank's routing and account number? Could they then deplete all your funds? Could they start billing you illegally, and would you catch it? These are all reasons why you need the plan. And then lastly, what would you do if you lost technology, whether it's a server, a switch, a router, a laptop? You've got your payment card devices sitting there on your counter. You just need to think about all the different technology that you use in your business and what you would do if you lost one of those pieces of technology. So having said all that, I've pretty much defined a lot of things. So let's walk through this process. And it all starts with that business impact analysis. You have to protect those critical services. What is the most important thing that you do as a business owner? That's probably sell products or sell services. That has to be your number one priority to restore that, because if you're not making money, then you can't afford to restore the rest of it. Then define your communication strategy. How would you communicate with your partners, both upstream and downstream? How would you communicate with your staff? If there's a major power outage, will you still have cell service? Will your phone lines work? If somebody has your credentials to your email, would you want to use that same email address to notify your staff? Because potentially, if somebody's in your network, they would see you report that. They now know that you know they're there. So you need to think, do I have it's called out of bands communication. Could I use radios? Could I use somebody else's cell phone, etc.? And then have that list of who you would call. And please print that out. More organizations than not sit there and develop all these plans, develop all these procedures, and develop all these processes, and then they put it on their laptop or on their server. And then guess what? You get ransomware and you don't know who to call. Okay, so with that, I'm going to take a quick break, get a drink of water. Lucas, do we have any questions yet?
Nope, no questions and nothing in chat so far.
All right. So on top of the list of contacts, you then list all of the data that you need. Okay, this could be a customer file. This could be your invoices, your accounting information that you would need to operate it. This could be your employee HR records that you have to maintain. It could be all your financial banking information, all of this stuff. You need to list that and prioritize it. And then hopefully you develop that backup plan. So as you do sales every day, just back it up every night onto a portable device and take that with you. Something as simple as that. This way, should your data be ransomware, you can kind of come back in and say, now we're not going to pay, and just restore it from these backups. You know, depending on how much data you have or how many records were ransomware, depends on how long it would take you to restore it. And oh, by the way, here's a fun fact. Did you know that if you take a file and password protect it, ransomware typically will not try to crack that password to ransom it? So all you have to do is, if you look at your files on your computer, if you password protect those, a lot of times that's sort of immunizing yourself against any ransomware attacks. It's something as simple as that. Also, make sure that nobody is running administrative accounts on your equipment. Always use a normal user account. What that means is if they click on that email that wants to download ransomware or malware or start sending emails on your behalf, things like that, it does not have the rights to install that software package. Thus, it can't hurt you. Then the next thing, your technology assets. Who would you call? What is it? Make, model, serial number. This is very handy. Should somebody break into your store, you've already got these reports. You can just hand the police. They'll automatically put it into their system and they'll start watching for the technology and hopefully catch the bad guys. Number one thing to do, though, is take your incident response plan. How does that compare to your safety checklist for your store? Your expectations to keep your employees and yourself safe. The number one thing you need to concern yourself with is safety of yourself and your employees. The rest of it can all be replaced. Compare your incident response plans to the business impact that you've developed up front. If your incident response plan is to restore, say, your ordering system, but your most important system is your customer, your point of sale system, then you need to readjust those business impacts to align themselves. Compare them to any physical security plans you have. These would be the checklists for opening the store, closing the store, your quarterly or semi-annual safety checks done by the fire departments, the police departments. And there's a good idea. Invite the fire departments and the police department into your facility. Take them on a tour. Let them know what it is you do and where people are and where your data and money are. This way, should at 2 in the morning your alarms go off, they know where to immediately respond, because that's where the bad stuff is going to happen. And then we're already discussing cyber impacts regarding information and technology, things like that. And also, you might want to think about having a social media policy. The last thing you want is your employees or your customers getting onto Facebook or Instagram or all these other platforms, and they start talking bad about your business. That'll kill anybody as a bad reputation. You need to make sure that the facts on social media are true. You need to be honest with your customer base and your partners, things like that. So do you have a social or a media process? This way, you know, if a reporter shows up, you have a response. If the police show up and they're investigators, you have the response. You already have this process in place to respond to all of this, things like that. So to help you out, and you know, I could go on and on and on about incident response, because there's a whole different vector of things. It could be your third-party vendors. Do they have access? It could be your employees. Are they upset with you? It could be yourself having a bad day at the office because the Chiefs lost or whatever. So we've put this into the DHS's cybersecurity plans and resources, and it's kind of a step-by-step of what you can do, whether you're a small business or a large business, things like that. What you need to take into account, how to develop this incident response plan, and then ultimately practice it with yourself and your staff. The irony about the big COVID shutdown is that DHS actually wanted to see if every employee within Homeland Security could work from home. The problem was we started that test last March around the 1st, and quite honestly, we had some bumps and we had some trials and tribulations, and we worked through them that week, and on Friday we were ready to go, and on Monday everybody was supposed to report back to the office, and then we got shut down due to COVID. So we had tested it, we had found the problems, we fixed them, and now it's part of our normal incident response plans. But this guide right here, and it should be part of the packet that Century is sending out to everybody that's on this call today. There's other numerous resources for you to use for planning regarding that. The Small Business Association has a cybersecurity focused on small businesses. These are the simple things you can do as a business owner. You know, if all you do is the basics, like list your assets, which is the information and technology. If all you do is that, you're ahead of most people, because most people don't even know what is contained regarding cyber on their laptops or on their servers. The neat thing the FCC came out was this device called the Cyber Planner. And I put a screenshot up here, and what it does is it takes you through a question and answer set once you open that up, and it discusses privacy and data security. and you populate it. What would you do for scams and fraud? What are you doing about network security? Hopefully, if you're not smart on network security, you're calling Century Business and saying, can you help me out here? How do you do website security? But it takes you through this entire process. You fill in the blanks, you populate it with the data, and then at the very end, you print it out. Now you have an incident response plan, okay, that you can review, you can practice, you can ask your employees to read, get their comments, always improve the process. And I would ask that whatever you do, once you do go through this process, don't just put it on the shelf and leave it alone, because technology changes. You may change facilities. I don't know what your employee turnover rate are or is, but you need to constantly refresh this. And then the Chamber of Commerce has those cybersecurity essentials for business. All kinds of tips and tricks and things you can do as a small business owner. And all of this is no cost to you. So I'm not asking you to go sign up for DHS services. Well, I could. I mean, there's a ton of services we provide at no cost. But I'm not asking you to put out some big financial outlay that might hurt your bottom line. Everything I talk about, everything DHS does is already funded and paid for. Part of your incident response plan, who would you call? You know, would you call the FBI? Possibly. I work very closely with the Kansas City Cybercrimes Task Force. And what I have seen over the last few years working with them is, let's say somebody calls your employees and says, hey, this is the boss, I need $10,000. Please go get Best Buy gift cards or something like that, and send them to me. If you contact the FBI within the first 24 hours, right now, their standard is that they can get you your money back if it's transferred out of a bank account on about a 92% success rate, as long as they are notified of it within the first 24 hours. After that, it goes down exponentially. So if you're embarrassed about doing this, or your staff is, for every day that you delay reporting it to the FBI, it cuts the ability for them to get the money down by half because of the way the banking industry works. There's the Cyber Task Force. You can call them. If you think you've been defrauded, or somebody is fraudulently using your business credit cards or your customers, you can contact them or the Secret Service. They're the ones that need to know about all of this payment card information, or that you accidentally released your banking information. They have the ability to put protections on all this to protect your finances. Okay, that's why they're included in here. Then if you notice something, and I don't care if it's a Sunday, I don't care if it's a national holiday, it could be Christmas. CISA's Central, our central clearinghouse for both physical, cyber, or communication issues. That office, that number is manned, staffed, I should say, 24/7, 365 days a year. Somebody will answer the phone. Somebody will answer that email address. If all it is, hey, I think I have ransomware, can you help me out? Absolutely. We can talk you through how to resolve that. We also have, regarding ransomware, a partnership with the FBI that we might even have a set of keys that would unlock your ransomed data, okay? We have a close working relationship with Interpol over in Europe. We've all been collectively grabbing all of those ransomware keys that could potentially unlock your data without you having to pay a fee. Then we have the emergency response teams. These are the teams that would help you with a ransomware attack or a malware attack, things like that. They can talk you through how to stop the problem and then how to recover your systems. There's something out there called the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or the MSISAC. That is a free site that you can sign up for, and you will receive current threat and vulnerability information. If you think back to my risk diagram, threats and vulnerabilities, if you don't know what threats or vulnerabilities you have, you don't know what to defend against or to mitigate. They provide a ton of information regarding threats or vulnerabilities to, say, Windows operating systems, Linux operating systems. There are sector-specific ISACs. What I mean by a sector-specific, we have 16 critical sectors in the United States. Some of them are banking, healthcare, water, wastewater, energy, transportation. Each of those different sectors have their own ISAC, and they focus on the typical services that those particular organizations would operate in. And then you would get more detailed threat and vulnerability information for free from them. They also have a 24/7, 365-day security operations center. Those folks also sit there and can help you out. They can do vulnerability management with you. They can provide you baseline configuration guides. This is what you should do to your laptops. This is what you should do to your servers. This is what you should do if you maintain your own routers or switches within your organization. Then they have assessment tools that you could go through, checklist by checklist, question by question, to help you secure that wireless or wired network environment. Okay, these are all things you should be doing ahead of time before it's time to call Jeff over at CISA. I mean, I'm happy to help, but the more you can do ahead of time to prevent these things, the better off you are. And please understand, my goal is for you to establish enough of a baseline that if the bad people rattle your doors and find they're locked, they go down the street. Trust me, these criminals don't want to have to work hard to make money. They want the easiest path. So if you have an open front door at 2 in the morning, they're going to steal your stuff. It's the same concept. If you lock your front door, they're going to go try to find the unlocked door. And the Multi-State ISAC and the Center for Internet Security can also help you, along with DHS guides. Lastly, there's a security framework out there called the Cybersecurity Framework. It's what all of CISA uses. It is a national standard. And again, if you look at it, it asks you to do 5 things. Have you identified your assets? And that would be your people, your data, your technology, and your facilities. And then you define, how do you protect those assets? How do you detect that somebody's having a bad day? I mean, can you pick up that one of your employees is in stress? Could be divorced, they could have an alcohol problem, they may not be able to feed the babies, you know, things like that. Could you detect that somebody is actually attacking your networks? Can you detect that somebody's actually checking your windows and doors at your business, seeing if you're unlocked? And then that leads into this incident response process of how would you respond to each of those different types of events. And then lastly, part of that incident response plan would be how you recover. Okay, 5 very simple things. There's 25 questions or 23 questions you need to look at to take care of that. But primarily, the toughest challenge for any business owner is, how do you detect a cyber attack, and what are your capabilities for responding to it? Do you have backups? Do you have backup equipment? How fast can you get that? How fast can you restore your data? Things like that. And these would be the questions you need to sit down with your staff and have those conversations about. You know, have them help you develop this. Determine what is at risk, what's the most critical service, And what's at risk? Is it the data? Is it the people? Is it the technology? Or is it just your storefront? You know, who is accountable for this? Is it you? Is it everybody? I would say everybody, because everybody in your organization probably has an email address. Things like that. What are your consequences? You know, do you have the money to pay a ransom? Could you potentially be arrested, you know, for not doing your due diligence or your due care? Things like that. If you have an attorney, have them help you out with these processes. There's such a thing as cyber insurance, no different than your business insurance that protects your facilities. You can get a low-cost cyber insurance policy to cover the losses from ransomware or an incident. That is now a thing. You just need to talk to your insurance agents. And then primarily it's all focused on you being able to sustain operations during an incident. And I know a lot of this is focused at cyber, but that's what I do. But you also need to be concerned about natural disasters and physical incidents. You know, look at what they're doing in DC and Portland. They're having to board up windows, you know, from the riots and whatnot. These are all the gamut of information that you need to think about. And then lastly, this is me. Take a screenshot of my contact information. And if you don't have it, Lucas over there at Century Business has it. It should be on the pamphlet of information that should be going out to everybody today regarding all of these resources and then some. I haven't even touched on all the available resources available to you. I haven't even touched on some of the assessments that I could support for your organization or how CISA could help you out. Okay, there's just a lot of stuff that is available to you if you just get in touch with us. Okay, and with that, I'm going to come off. This is our new symbol. This is all about cyber here, physical security, and emergency communications is where we came up with this. I appreciate the invite to do this again with Century Business. We got to do this last year as well. We did a morning and an afternoon session. It's always been a great turnout. I enjoy working with the small business owners because you are the engine of America. You know, you're the ones out there defining what services and goods that we buy and what you can support. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Again, I'm going to come up one last time. If anybody just needs my email address real quick, it's Geoffrey, like Geoffrey the giraffe. My last name with a dot in there at cisa.dhs.gov. Send me any questions or comments you may have. I look forward to working with you guys. I just wish we could all get out and about and get back to normal. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go to any questions that you all may have.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So we have from Joyce Dixon just thanking us. She said it was very informative, with many things to talk about. I definitely agree. Vicky Whitaker asks, is there a way to identify phishing emails prior to opening them? What antivirus do you recommend?
Those are two different conversations. I will caveat it with this. CISA will not recommend an antivirus manufacturer. And the reason, just like we don't recommend hardware vendors, okay? Because if I sat here and said, and I believe you said her name was Vicky,
Yep.
you know, go buy this antivirus and it will protect you, and then it doesn't, then we're potentially liable. But there's a ton of really high quality antivirus capabilities that will constantly search your email. But now I want to go back to the phishing email. There's a company out there called KnowBe4. They have free phishing campaign assessments you can conduct against yourself and your employees. I wish I had a good looking phishing email that would discuss it, but things like click on this link and it looks like it's coming from, say, citibank.com. If you can remember, like, the email addresses are underlined, or a lot of times these links to websites are underlined. If the staff puts their mouse over the top of it and they look down in the bottom left of the screen, what you may see in front of you as a hyperlink may not be accurate. So if you put the hyperlink, say, over citibank.com, and you put your mouse over the top and look down on the bottom left, a lot of times it may say something like bogus email at .eu or European, it's not a true link to a true site. That's the first thing. Other common things is all capital lettering, meaning they're yelling at you. Bad use of English or grammar. And by the way, the FBI has apprehended the Nigerian prince who's given away all of his money. So those are false. My final recommendation regarding emails, it doesn't take much. If you receive an invoice or a file from somebody call and verify that they just sent it to you. It's that easy. I don't think they're going to be offended in today's cyber world. Hey, Joe Subob, did you just send me an invoice? Yes, we did. Okay, then I'll open it. And if not, and there's no answer, don't open it. That's the safest thing you can do. If it's that important to the sender, they'll send it again. Okay? Anything
Awesome.
else?
Yep, we do have one more. What has been the biggest issue you faced during the pandemic? Are you still doing anything on site with a customer? That's from Mike Chilcote.
Mike, we are not doing anything on site short of major incident responses, meaning my only on site visitations have been with the healthcare organizations prior to the vaccination rollouts. Okay. Otherwise, I am at home. What was the other part of the question?
So what were the biggest issues you faced during the pandemic or due to the pandemic?
Biggest issues we have faced is, as you know, and this may be pertinent, it might not be permanent. I don't know the business size of the participants, but when they shut down for COVID, they sent everybody home. There was not enough technology for all the employees to work from home. So what we found were the business owners were asking employees to use their own devices, their own home laptop, their own iPads, things like that. And so what was happening was your business environment just expanded all the way out to your employees' homes. And then if you think about it, if you go to Best Buy, you buy a laptop and you configure it, all you do is change the name to yourself and add a password. So now all the employees are working from workstations that they are the administrators on, and they have access to your business environment. Never mind the fact that a lot of the times they sent the kids home as well. Suddenly we were using our one personal laptop for the kids' Zoom calls back to school. Who knows what the kids were clicking on? YouTube is a good thing, but a lot of times within the videos or whatnot, there's bad stuff. So the biggest challenge is, how do you keep your employees working securely back to the home environment? Do you have trusted VPNs back? Who controls that home router? Who has access to your employees' home network? Everybody's got these wireless cameras and whatnot. And as we've discussed, if those aren't secure, your neighbor at home could potentially get onto your wireless, use your path right back into your business and download all your information. That quite honestly has been our biggest challenge, is educating everybody to do things securely from the home all the way to the business world.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Looks like that was the last question. And yeah, All of those questions that you guys are asking there are things that we deal with and can help with. Even if you just have some follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to your contact person or visit us on our website. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. This was a really good webinar. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. This presentation is part of a cybersecurity webinar series brought to you by Century Business Technologies. Again, for more information about Century and future webinars, please visit our website, www.centuryks.com, or email cybersecurity@centuryks.com, and we hope to see you again next time.